what online makes a real estate company look trustworthy or not trustworthy?
Yeah, that's a great question. Especially nowadays, I think that in the span of the existence of the commercial real estate world, it's typically lagged behind the rest of the world by about 20 to 30 years. So a lot of the commercial real estate, systems, processes, online presence has been just a little bit delayed. And so in commercial real estate, if you put a lot of effort in your digital presence, it can give a really sharp first impression. The big part about that is that commercial real estate is a huge trust game. In the same way that a family looks at a home purchase as their biggest, investment of their life, a company will have millions of dollars in their real estate portfolio. And even, a company that leases space, millions of dollars that they're paying in their real estate. So there's an enormous amount of trust that goes into it. And if you don't represent that well right off the bat, it's going to definitely hurt you in the long run.
So what's interesting to me, if real estate, especially commercial real estate, is such a trust factor to how you get business and how you keep business, why do you think it's kind of lagged behind other industries in terms of, I guess online presence or just other technological stuff,
Yeah, that's actually a good question. So the commercial real estate industry has been built on the expertise of individuals. In a lot of industries, for example, insurance, you've got your insurance salesperson, and then you've got the people who actually perform the operations of putting the insurance together and running all the documents, creating the documents, all of that stuff. And commercial real estate, especially in brokerage, you'll have one person that does both sides of that. They'll do the operations of the transactions, the negotiations. They'll, take a look at the lease. And then they'll also be out there selling themselves. And that just conglomerate of different aspects of the job has given commercial real estate brokers specifically the ability to rely on their own expertise and take the transactions into their, own side and not have to display as much, not have to show as much. And it's really built it in a way that everybody's been burned by commercial real estate if you've been in real estate long enough. That just happens. And so if you find someone that's really good, they're really good and they have a proven track record of being great. You don't really expect them to do a lot of other things as long as you get the results that you want. So I know it's a little bit of a long way about the answer, but it's just the way that it's set up is it doesn't incentivize growth in industries, and it's technology hasn't been a competitive advantage for a long time probably up until about 2-3 years ago.
No, that's awesome. And so I kind of understand that from, let's say, like a higher level view of the industry, right? And before we get into what makes a firm more trustworthy, I kind of want to talk about what are some things, inverse thinking in a way, that makes a company less trustworthy, like let's say on their online presence.
Yeah. Branding yourself as something that you're not.
Yeah.
Not something that you don't want to be. Like if you want to be something and you want to brand yourself as that's different, But branding something as something that you are not is horrible for a commercial real estate firm and will absolutely destroy trust. With a commercial real estate firm that markets themselves as maybe a global titan and whatnot, but they're really just a 10-person team, that'll really hurt them because they'll be selling themselves as that. Their digital presence, their, what they put on the internet, on LinkedIn or whatnot is going to be showcasing that. And then you get down to the nuts and bolts of it and you realize that their systems, their processes, everything about it is just going through email and Excel like they were 30 years ago, And so you have to be able to market yourself and brand yourself correctly up front so that you deliver exactly what you promise, and that's what keeps your trust.
And I also feel like, even from my own perspective, we started putting the word boutique in front of all of our web design agency, and because we're a small select team, we're not a global studio at the moment. But I think that plays into our marketing because it's more truthful, but also the people who are seeking that solution will come to you. So I also feel like from a real estate firm's perspective, if you market yourself as like we're a select few, we're a 10-person team, it's probably even a more effective marketing strategy than just lying about it or trying to go around that.
Yeah, it definitely can be. It definitely can be. So commercial real estate firms that have thousands of employees, they can't make the promise that every single one of their employees is perfectly trustworthy because they just don't know.
Yeah.
You know, the CEO can be the best guy in the world. The executive team can be all perfectly vetted people. But once you get down to employee 2,750, you know, you're not eyeballing them all the time. You can't afford to. And so you have to make the promise that you're too big to fail. But the reverse is that you give your sell based on transparency and morality. And you're saying, hey, you know, we're a small team, but we put an enormous amount of effort. And here's why. And, you know, the firm that I'm at, Holt Lunds for Commercial, we are a faith-based firm. And so in our messaging, we're a small firm, you know, we're Texas only. And in our messaging, we tell people, hey, you know, we're not the biggest. We're not in, you know, 20 different states or 50 different states. We're just in Texas. That's where we're based out of. But on our masthead, we have a subscribe to morals and values that every employee has accepted before accepting the job. And so that's what you're getting. And so that sell is completely different, and it delivers a 100% a different message than the too big to fail model. It can be charming. Definitely can.
Yeah, I completely agree. Would you say there's any other important values besides, so trust is kind of the main thing that you've kind of brought up. Is there any other important values? So I think in your marketing, like faith-based is pretty interesting. Also being like geography-wise, like all based in Texas. Any other kind of key, we'll frame it, is there any other key marketing points that you've seen work in terms of like your branding, your messaging for a real estate firm?
Yeah. Well, one that sticks out to me, and specifically not just with websites, not just with LinkedIn, but everything down to the exact deliverables that you give a client, that represents you. You know, and if your marketing isn't cohesive, that's can confuse clients sometimes, right? In general, that can, you know, confuse anybody. If you're giving branding stuff like you're a tech company and then you flip it around and you look like a law firm, nobody knows what they're looking at, right?
Yeah.
But besides just being consistent, if it doesn't look great, the question is, okay, you didn't put a lot of effort into detail on what everybody sees every single day. Are you going to put the same amount of effort and detail into my transaction? You know, I've got a $4 million lease obligation here. Are you going to actually negotiate it? Or, you know, like your website, like your LinkedIn, are you just not going to put any effort in? That matters a lot. The professionalism of it and the intentionality of it, it really translates.
So it seems, if I'm breaking it down, correct me if I'm wrong, it seems like trust, but more important than that, as a sub bucket, maybe is like authenticity, it's consistency, it's attention to detail. There's some kind of the key variables,
Yeah.
I'd say.
Yeah, those are a bunch of them.
Yeah,
for sure.
That definitely makes sense. And so I guess we can kind of talk about that now. So in terms of the marketing channels, right, that you've seen work, so we kind of talked about LinkedIn, your website. What are some of the main avenues that you see, and even for yourself, you know, done really well for marketing that you should look at? Like, what are some of the main avenues you would say?
Well, I should answer that question, but I should give a little bit of a backstory. So, commercial real estate was built on door knocking. Right. And so even when I started in the industry, my first year, I would go to the top of an office building, just like this one. And I would go floor by floor knocking on it until some secretary would kick me out.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
It's not fun. But you do it hundreds of times and eventually you get a client. Right. It's a numbers game. The second thing, once you've kind of figured that out. You've kind of cut your teeth on that. The second thing that I did was email marketing, right? And so being able to deliver consistent, great emails that have interesting hooks that actually provide value and they're not just some spammy thing. That's another really important thing. But then the industry has started, now this is where we're getting to your answer, started to look at actual marketing channels. And the typical advertising doesn't really work. I don't want to say it doesn't work, but it hasn't been incredibly successful based on the data that we have right now because we're not advertising to a large base of people that can make decisions. We're advertising to one person in a 400-person company, and that's the CEO. Yeah. And that's the only person that can really make a decision. So unless the CEO sees the advertisement and finds it compelling, which already, if you're the CEO, you have a very low, you have a very high sales resistance, is what it's called. You're not going to see an ad and just click on it, right? Especially not for a $4 million lease obligation. You're going to want to know the person behind and everything. So ads haven't been a big thing. But this comes to the door number 3, which is your social media presence. It has become a quintessential part, and commercial real estate's been lagging behind for 20, 30 years. But the commercial real estate presence in social media is going to be huge in the next 10 years. And if you're not consistently putting your information out telling people who you are, what you do, showing irrevocable proof that you are who you say you are, you're going to have a very difficult time competing against the guy that does.
I think this is going to be, we're going to try to not make this a 4-hour conversation, but I want to zone in on each of those because that's so interesting. So on the first point, I think we could talk about that real quick on the in-person marketing, say like door knocking. And we'll focus on that actually.
Okay.
Do you think, and this is out of curiosity for myself, do you think, door-to-door sales still has a huge role in commercial real estate? And if so, when should or should not someone use that as kind of a marketing channel?
I'll tell you the pros and cons of it first, and then I'll answer the question really directly. So the pros of it are that when you're knocking on a door of an office building, right, like a Class AA office building in uptown of wherever you're at, right, the person behind that door is with 100% certainty qualified to be someone that you'd work with. So you're not just door knocking on a house and hoping that a CEO of a Fortune 500 company walks out, right? You're knocking on qualified leads. That's the pro, right? The other pro of it is in the age of AI and, everybody's gotten tons of spam emails. It's really great to have a literal proof like, oh my gosh, you're a real human being. Those are the pros, right? The cons is that it's not scalable. And the other cons of it is that especially nowadays, CEOs more often than not are working from home. They're not in the office nearly as much as they used to be. Now there's some that are, and the ones who are in high growth mode, sure, they might be, but there's a lot of CEOs that are in the office maybe one day a week. So you're not going to find them, right? And that's happening more and more, especially since 2019, when the whole world shut down. And because of that, door knocking has already started tapering off in its effectiveness. And now digital marketing emails have probably taken the lead.
Yeah.
I don't know if that completely answers the question, but
that completely does. And you also brought up a few different things that I had to think about. One, the effect of more people not even being in their office. You might have an office, but you're not going to probably reach the person you need to reach. The other thing is, it's kind of interesting how you kind of know your targeting is going to be right. You're going to know they're qualified. Where I think in the online space, nearly half or 80% of what you're doing is just filtering through qualified and unqualified leads. Yeah. And if you're knocking on, a great building, even like this, you're going to know that they can afford your services or whatever the case may be, want to be interested. So I think that's super interesting to talk about. Let's look at email marketing. So what role?
Real quick, do you want me to tell you another little fun fact on the con side?
We'll take it. Yeah,
I hate to cut you off. I'm going to say this because it's directly related. So more and more companies are doing badge access for elevators, right? And so guys are coming in the industry, they're not able to just go up. Yeah, it's just another fun fact, right? More and more buildings are doing it. So you can't really solicit like you could in the past. Anyway.
It's interesting. Yeah, that's another interesting one.
That's another reason why it's going away.
Yeah, exactly. So on email marketing, let's say, which there's a few different ways we can take that, right? But what has worked for you? What hasn't worked in terms of using email as an effective marketing channel?
That's okay. So there's two kinds of email marketing that you can do in my industry that I'm aware of, right? The first is that you're sending specific data to a specific client. Now, it's great. It's hard to scale, but it's great because the hit rate is going to be a lot higher in general, right? Somebody sends you something. They're saying, hey, understand that you signed this lease back in 2018. You got a year left. The rates have changed a lot. That kind of messaging specific to you. Okay, cool. Great. The other kind of email marketing is larger scale email marketing. And it's stuff when you don't necessarily know anything about the prospective client. Yeah. Right. And in those cases, the really important stuff that you have to send is irrefutable evidence that you are who you say you are and you're great at what you say you're great at. Right. So case studies are a great way to connect with people. Hey, I just figured I'd tell you this is my deal of the week that I'm sending you. We just did the deal for Make-A-Wish. We moved him from their, headquarters in Addison to the new headquarters in Dallas. We got him building signage, 11 months free, all this stuff that you could say. Now someone's reading it and it's not specific to them, but they're looking at it and saying, okay, this guy's actually pretty good at what he does. Mm-hmm. I think you should stay away from the mailers, for prospecting, generating business and stuff. Retaining clients is fine. You can do that. But for retaining business, the whole unsubscribe, subscribe system is pretty brutal, especially when you put somebody on it and they didn't ask for it. Nobody likes that.
I would also say, and correct me if I'm wrong on this, in your industry, because the ticket value is so high, that the business model, it works to go almost less scalable, meet the person in person, deliver the email directly to them, spend more time. And then also, it's probably a small enough industry, especially in local markets, to where your reputation really matters. And you don't want to be the guy who spammed 2 million emails to the entire market, and then everyone knows that. And
that's really true. That's a really great point. It's very, very true. And that's why the scalability hasn't been as big of an issue. And it's why you still see commercial real estate firms go out and door knocking, sending their young guys to go out and door knocking and stuff, right? Because you don't really need to be scalable to a certain degree. Yeah. But at the same time, that was definitely true 5 years ago. It's still becoming less true today. Yeah. Even with the big ticket prices, even with the fact that it doesn't hurt to be not scalable. Nowadays, stuff is going to spam in emails, right? All the time. It takes one click to delete an email, right? Yeah. And then when you're door knocking, the guy's not even there. The guy hasn't been in the office for 4 years. He lives in Chicago now. Yeah. That's just not going to help you out.
Yeah, it's interesting because let's just say, a service business is spending $1,000 to get a sale, and their ticket value, say it's 5-10 grand, whatever. Yeah. There's a return on that, obviously. But even as a commercial real estate firm, it could cost you $100,000 to get a deal. But because of the deal size, it could really work. However, I do think if you invest the same $100 grand in the online space rather than in person, say, whatever campaign you're going to do, I think it could be pretty effective. So let's talk about social media.
Yeah, that's a great segue, because the conversion there that I've even thought about is that the psychology of everybody nowadays, not just CEOs, not just people being solicited for commercial real estate counsel, right, has changed to, I know who you are, I know what you do, I'll reach out to you if I want to.
Yeah.
Versus before, you didn't know who they were. You didn't know what they did, right? Like if they came and knocked on your door, you're like, oh my gosh, I never would have known you existed. But nowadays, with social media and whatnot, you can send them a postcard, you can send them an email. They'll go to your LinkedIn, they'll know who you are.
Yeah.
And if you have a great presence and you're showing what you do and how you do it, and you're including people in your story, people will just reach out to you. You just have to be consistent. Yeah. For a long period of time.
Let me ask you a seemingly obvious question, but I want your input. So you see the CEOs of these major companies, right? Let's say, I think it was BlackRock, John Gray, I think he has a huge social media presence now. You have all these other CEOs that are investing more into their social media brand. Do you think that that's a trend that's going to continue? And if so, why? Do you think, because these are, people that are doing, it's the biggest business development in the world, I guess, is an opportunity. So what do you think the importance of that? Do you think it's going to continue for these huge real estate firms?
I definitely think it's important. And it's important for different reasons. For companies that are B2C, right? Like the guy who, the Chick-fil-A family, for example. I don't know what their social media presence is, but if he has an amazing social media presence and he's super likable, people are going to go buy the chicken sandwich, right? For the owner of Ericsson, the CEO of Ericsson, if he's got a big social media presence, mom sees it, she's not going to go and buy a Chick-fil-A sandwich from Ericsson. There's not a B2C aspect there, but what will happen is that as they accumulate, follower count, which is social proof, that social proof is going to directly correlate to trust, because when we're just people, it's natural. When we see 150,000 people follow this person, we're like, oh my gosh, this guy must be doing something right. He must be the expert in his field. I'll follow him. And I'm the person who actually has 2 million to drop into Ericsson's program that they have got, right? Yeah. So that's just, there's a different psychology, but it's very valuable for different reasons, but it's going to keep going up. It's going to keep going huge.
And I think the other great argument that I heard for social media and investing into it is on the recruiting side too. Let's say in commercial real estate, I know a huge part of the business model is recruiting the top brokers and agents and whatnot. So how much of a role would you think that plays into the recruiting side, which is important to your business model?
So I've seen it go both ways. Firms that have been slower to adopt the social proof through media and social media, they've penalized, and I'm not going to say who, but they've penalized people who have gone more the social proof and social media route, right? Because our industry has been really successful as an industry, really successful, keeping all of the secrets in our pockets, and not being transparent and just being able to, trust me, I'll take care of it.
Yeah.
Right. And it's been very successful that way. So those who have really adopted that model, I've seen them penalize that. But on the flip side, commercial real estate, you want to go and you want to work for a winning company. You want to work for a winning team. You want to work for a winning person, right? A winning executive. And if you are in a ship where you're seeing someone who is just the captain and they're living everything and they're transparent and they're always out there and they're giving that social proof that your company is being led by the person we say it's being led by, right? I'm going to keep on going back to that. You're going to want to work for them.
Yeah.
You're going to. And that is also going to be a hedge against size. So smaller commercial real estate firms who have a fantastic presence. I'll give an example here.
Yeah.
Ryan Searhan.
Yep.
Are you familiar with that guy? Okay. Yeah. Selling Manhattan. I mean, the biggest residential real estate agent in the world. He wasn't in the past. He was a solo shop.
Yep.
Tiny.
Yeah, Brad, look at that.
Oh, well, bankers are massive. And then Ryan Searhan becomes so big, everybody wants to follow him. I mean, that's just just the social proof and people saying, oh my gosh, this guy's a winner. Let me go and work for him. They would have gone and worked for something like Coldwell Banker, somebody like, Keller Williams, another big residential real estate brokerage or whatever. So it's a really great hedge if you're small and you want to attract great talent. It's fantastic.
I almost feel like this was described to me a few weeks ago, and I agree. I want your opinion on this, that the talent acquisition system is almost the same or very similar to the client acquisition system for any business, where let's just say you're posting on social media to gain more trust to get more clients. It's almost the same way where you're posting on social media to gain more trust to attract the best talent.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, so that's 100% true. And it's the same reason why big companies will go in fancy office buildings, right? They're not going to the fancy office building because they need, 15,000 square foot gym. Yeah. They're going there because when their client comes and looks at the 15,000 square foot gym, they're like, oh my gosh, this company's a winner. Yeah. Like this is a place that I want to go and be a client of. The exact same thing happens with the employee recruitment and whatnot. You have to, be a winner.
So I do have another question. So in terms of, we talked about trust building on the talent side in real estate, trust building and how branding plays a role in the client side. Now, I've seen a ton of a trend, I'll say, where, social CEOs of these big, brokerage companies, real estate firms in general, are making almost like educational content. Like, here's what you should know, insights, things like that. How much of a role do you think that specifically plays, and why do you think people are doing that?
Yeah, oh gosh, I feel bad. I'm not plagiarizing. I can't remember the guy who said it. But B2B is, especially nowadays, a race to the bottom. It's what can you give away, especially in the service industry. What can you give away that's going to attract a customer to buy to upsell the actual product, right? So in commercial real estate brokerage, when I sell a building, I'm the person who's selling the building will pay me, but it's not the case when I'm buying a building. The person who's buying. So, I don't always take a fee, but even still, that purchase of a building is the upsell, right? And so if I'm creating content where, one, it breaks down and gives transparency for the DIY. If you're looking to buy a building, these are the checklists that I would go through to make sure that you hit all of these so you don't get screwed, right? That's going to help. And the people who are going to DIY are going to DIY anyway. They were never going to work with you. You don't have to worry about those people. You give that content to them for free because you're a good Samaritan, right? The other 95% of people who don't want to have to do it yourself, they see that content. They're like, oh, that's really interesting information. I love that. Now let me reach out to them because I don't want to have to do it myself. Yep. You give informational content that helps people understand things. People see it. They realize how big of a scope of work it is. It takes us 9 months to close a deal. It takes us 9 months. With Make-A-Wish, it took us from the time that they started working with us in February of 24, they moved in June of 25. Like, it's a huge timeline. And let's say that a CEO sees that. They're going to think to themselves, great, I know how to do it now because Tom has put out all this great content. I don't want to deal with it. I don't want to have to do it myself. Let me just get Tom to do it. I want to run my business, So that's what just naturally happens.
Yeah. And so what do you think the focus should be? I basically want to talk about the difference between for a commercial real estate firm, the personal brand versus the actual company brand. You know, do you have any sort of insight onto how you've seen company brands, you know, do their social media presence really well versus a personal brand, and kind of talk through those two different angles?
So I think it depends. I think B2B and B2C are different. B2C, you should really focus on your company's brand, because when you go to Chick-fil-A, right, you're not seeing the Chick-fil-A family behind the counter. You know, you're seeing an employee. And so the CEO of Chick-fil-A, he can make great content to promote the brand itself and to directly tie it in so that when people go to Chick-fil-A, they love the brand, right? But in B2B, it's a little bit different. You want to be at a shop that represents your values, you know, that represents who you are and is consistent with who you are. If you're at a shop that's not consistent with who you are and your personal brand is in direct conflict with your company's brand, that's an issue. Right? Because there's no symbiotic relationship here. When people see your company and they say, oh, we're hiring you based on your company, and then you're different, that's a problem. And then vice versa, when they hire you thinking that they're getting just you. I mean, there has to be a cohesiveness between you and your company. So if there's similar brands and there's similar cohesiveness as far as like what they stand for, then the personal brand really, really matters. Because especially in B2B, you are working with a human being. You know, the person that you see talking about the step-by-step guide on how to buy a building, that is the guy you're going to work with. And if that guy doesn't have a great presence, you're going to go to the guy that does, because you've seen his content, you've seen his social proof, you know who he is, you know the names of his kids because he posts them on social media, you know? Yeah. Like, you like him. That's who you're going to go with.
Sirhan is a great example. I'm happy you brought that up.
That guy.
I personally watch his content all the time, and I'm not a buyer, but I think I can see why so quickly, because I think he started his company semi-recently, right, in the last few years.
I think he started it probably like 10 years ago, but this is the promise for social media, is that don't think that you're going to post one thing and then you're going to blow up. And most of us only know him for the past couple of years, but I am so grateful for Ryan, because he has expedited every industry by being the trailblazer, so that everybody else can look at him and say, okay, this actually matters, right? Yeah. And the guys that reach out to them, they're not just some it's not just some small person. Yeah. People reaching out to him are like billionaires, right? They're people that I would want to have as a client in commercial real estate. And so it's not like his social media is B2C. He proved that the B2B model works even with LinkedIn and social proof.
That's what I was going to say. So it's not like, because I feel in other industries, in tech, in marketing, there's been a lot of figureheads at the top of those industries for a while. But building a brand in like commercial real estate, I think that's kind of proving that you could break the mold. So I think that's super interesting.
Yeah, absolutely.
I think it'd be a good segue to talk about what in your own personal brand are you looking to test, for your marketing strategies, let's say over the next 12 months, 18 months?
So I have a lot of things that I really want to do.
We can break each of them down.
No, I don't want to. I'm not going to say all of the things that I can strategies. Sorry, let's not. But I do want to lean more into video content. I do think that that's great. AI has been so good that when you post a post on LinkedIn and it's all text, for example, right? People assume that you use ChatGPT. Even if you didn't, people just assume that you do. And so video content is just an extra layer of transparency and trust that you can build right away. I'd like to lean into that more. And I'd like to bring people along with me into my world more. Right now it is, sometimes like this is how you do something, this is what I did. There's a case study or whatever. I'd like to lean into bringing them behind the scenes, behind the curtain, and showing them what's really going on in commercial real estate and how you can really do well.
Yeah.
So that's my objective, but I'm not going to go too far into it.
Yeah, for sure. And I do want to talk about LinkedIn because that is my favorite platform in the world. And anyone who knows me knows I talk about LinkedIn probably 5 times a day. So would you say, and I think we're about to hit 13,000 connections soon. So
that's awesome. That is awesome.
Yeah, because I'm a celebrity apparently. But how important would you say LinkedIn has been for what you've been doing, or will be important for what you're doing? Because I know you're investing in that.
Yeah, so I really only heavily invested the past 6 months. So I don't want to get ahead of myself, but I think it's going to be huge. I think it's going to be huge. There's so much really, really great voices in LinkedIn who have seen incredible growth for them and their firms. And for me to be a part of that, that'd be awesome. I really believe the Jesse Eisler, I think his name is, people don't buy into products and services. Like, I can talk about my transaction management system and my processes all day long, and I can show with actual validated proof how good I am at what I do. People don't really care about that. People care about people, momentum, and stories. And so I think it's going to be a huge part in telling the story, showing momentum, bringing people in behind the scenes. And I mean, at a certain point, I think it's going to completely replace all other forms of networking, marketing, everything.
Yeah. It's just I love LinkedIn. And I think it's just the greatest place to actually meet people, in business, because you're not going to go on to Facebook. I know Twitter is somewhat popular. Like in the design industry, all the designers are talking on Twitter, but no, I don't think in commercial real estate, So I think it's for most 99% of industries, I think LinkedIn's like the platform. And I think it's probably the most important platform right now that you should be focusing on. Just my 2 cents. That and YouTube.
I've got a funny opinion on this that I've actually never said out loud, but I'll say it on air. No, no. The thing is with LinkedIn, social media is addicting for a lot of people, right? Unfortunately, that's also true with LinkedIn, because it actually is social media. But the trick that LinkedIn has mastered is that an executive of a company can go and sit down at their computer and scroll LinkedIn and justify it in their head, right? And so you have...
I've never done this.
You have... Yeah, the smile.
I did it this morning. Yeah.
You have the justification to do it. And people downplay that level of psychological power that's going on right now. And if you don't lean into it, you're going to get left behind. There's a lot of people that kind of discount it. And they shouldn't.
What's interesting is that it's almost just, I think Gary Vaynerchuk has this saying, it's like platforms and culture. It's like on LinkedIn, the culture is that it's business minded. So you're sharing business things. Yeah. And so even though feature wise, it's similar to most other platforms. You can share video, you can share text, you can, friend people, that sort of thing. But it's crazy how just framing it as this is the business platform changes your entire experience.
Yeah.
And that's why I also think when you're marketing on social media, making sure that you're actually fitting the culture of that platform is probably the most important thing. Because a post on LinkedIn would probably not do well on a post on Facebook or Instagram.
Yeah. You have to be able to connect the dots for people. If you just start posting personal stuff on LinkedIn, people are just going to be like, what are you doing, dude?
Yeah.
This is your personal life. Keep this out of here. Right. But if you're really good at connecting, what you would typically post on another social media with the values that you stand for in the business world, or the processes or the secrets that you have, whatever the content is in the business world, people are going to eat it up.
Yeah.
Because they love seeing the kids, going down the slide or whatever, the family photos and stuff. People actually really like that.
Yeah.
But they have to be able to justify it to themselves.
Yeah.
Edutainment's a real thing.
Yeah. I believe it. And in big, bold letters, I wanted to make sure to talk about my favorite topic, the website. So, in commercial real estate, what are some key things you've seen make a website really good, really effective? And it could be from getting clients, it's also getting talent. And what is things that the opposite is not doing really well?
Well, we've talked a little bit about it, but I'm glad that we're diving into it. So the stuff that has done really bad, I'm going to talk about that, is when companies misrepresent themselves. And it's very easy to do. That misrepresenting yourself as a company is even worse than just having a bad website, than having an old website. When you misrepresent yourself as a company, you can initially win the business through, website traffic and whatnot, but they're going to find out really quickly that is not what you have on your masthead. So boutique firms lean into being a boutique firm. Big firms lean into being a big firm. Do what you say you're going to do, market what you say you're going to do for your clients and whatnot, and brand yourself as that. And if you do that really well, you're going to have a great website. You're going to have a great website. If you do that poorly, you're going to break all of your trust. And then even if somebody doesn't fire you, even if a client works for you and they like the process enough and they didn't fire you and they worked with you and they were happy with their thing, when somebody asks them about it, they're going to be like, oh yeah, Holt Lunsford, they say that they're a faith-based firm, but they're not. That's going to be the messaging. And what kind of taste is that going to leave in somebody's mouth if that's what people are telling on your behalf because you misrepresented yourself in your branding, So that's what people do really bad. The stuff that you can do really well is make sure that you are really cohesive. I mean, don't have your materials be some eloquent, really long, articulated things. When a CEO is going to your website and they're wanting to know about you and your firm, they don't want to have to read a Harvard, New York Times style art. They want to do third grade reading level so that they can get it quickly. They can outread you for sure. They usually speak multiple languages, right? But they don't want to have to deal with that when they're looking at it. So be concise, use layman terms, talk about who you are, and then, frame it in a way where this is who I am and I happen to do real estate. Mm-hmm. Don't frame it in a way where, hey, we've got the best products and services. Don't do that,
It's so funny to talk about the reading level. I think 50% of the design work we do is taking their concept and saying, we got to make this simpler because no one's going to understand this. And so, and I would imagine in commercial real estate, because it's definitely a fancier industry, that, most websites are probably hard to read and they need to be way simpler.
Lots of content, lots of little terms and stuff, talking about the markets and whatnot, talking about square feet and triple nets, and people have no idea what that means.
Yeah.
People, when they look at a real estate transaction and they want to, negotiate their leases, they'll front and they'll act like they've done this a million times. But the reality is that most people, even executives, have negotiated some kind of office lease or purchase maybe once or twice in their life. A lot of these leases are 5 to 10 year leases. How long are you going to be with a company? In modern times, you're with the company a couple years. A CEO is running a company for 7 to 10 before he sells. He's done 2 leases max. So you have to be able to communicate really clearly, and you don't want to throw in a bunch of stuff that doesn't make sense. You save that for when you can sit down with them and you can have a conversation.
And do you think there's a place for marketing on other platforms we haven't talked about? Let's say, also Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, let's say everything besides LinkedIn, and we can talk about YouTube too. Like, we can break it down by platform. Do you think there's a place for that in commercial real estate?
I do. I think that there's going to be a lot of success in the near future with firms who are making stuff for LinkedIn and then they repurpose it for everything else. I think it's going to be a situation where they're saying, well, we've already got it. Let's just post it, right? And they're going to see a ton of growth. I think that the really innovative commercial real estate firms are going to lift the curtain a little bit and show what happens behind the scenes and show a lot of really cool stuff that goes on that we don't actually show. And it's going to attract a lot of just normal people that are going to build social proof in these other platforms. But yeah, I mean, the only caveat that I'll say with that is that with whatever content you're making, if it's a 45-second video, don't try to explain an entire process in a 45-second video. Use bullet points, have a great hook, great value add. Just give the summary to give people a taste and show the fun parts about it. And if they're interested, give them an opportunity to reach out and learn more,
I completely agree. And then the other thing we haven't talked too much about, which I know is big in commercial real estate, is like cold outreach, whether it be calls, it could be DMs on LinkedIn, it could be emails. Do you want to talk about some of the ways that's done right and ways it's done wrong at each of those kind of intervals?
I wish I knew more about cold DMs. You're way more, proficient in that area. I come to you for advice. But for cold emails, I do think that there's a lot of things that go wrong with cold emails. First off, when people send cold emails, I've worked with a bunch of analysts, a bunch of young guys getting into business, and I'm sure I did this a ton when I first started. But the problem is that you think to yourself, we were talking about layman's terms, you think to yourself that the CEO is going to want to read 4 paragraphs of why they should hire you. That's just not what they want to see. That's the quickest delete they're ever going to click. They want to see 2 sentences where you're saying who you are and why you're even reaching out to them.
Yeah.
And then they don't want to hear you say, do you have time for a call? Right? Can we meet? You don't have to do you have a quick coffee. Yeah. It's an eloquent industry. People expect a certain level of professionalism. And when you reach out, just say, I thought this might be helpful. That's all you have to say. And that's the best way to do it. Yeah. The worst way is bogging them down with a whole bunch of stuff that they have to read and just annoying them.
Yeah. And I learned this for the first time from Ryan Serhant, but I find that almost the bigger the deals get, let's say for my business, the quicker the communication channels have been. Like this morning, we're talking about one of our biggest website deals ever, and we're doing it over like, one or two sentence emails back and forth with not a bunch of grammar, all this sort of stuff. And I've kind of seen that, and I think having simplicity in all of the marketing you're doing is probably the most important thing you could do. And same thing for cold outreach. If you're picking up the phone, you're going to do a cold call. The worst thing you could do, because I've done a lot of cold calls when I was, especially at the internships that I had, is just talk for 30 minutes and then say, oh, what do you think? It's like the guy already hung up. You just didn't realize.
So that's happened. That's happened. Yeah, I think that this goes down to the experience and the culture of people at the top versus when you're first starting out. And there's a lot of people who get stuck in certain phases, but when you're first starting out, you want to be great at everything. And you try to learn everything, and you try to go through everything. You want to do everything yourself, And then you get to a phase where you start delegating. And at the top, you can't do everything. If you've got 3,000 employees, you're not doing everything. When you have 3,000 employees for your design firm, your marketing firm, next year, exactly. You're not going to be going down and editing websites. You just don't have the time. You're going to be delegating it to great people, and you're not going to have the time to have full conversations with all of them. Unfortunately, that's what happens. And so you're going to start training your brain in a completely different way, which is tell me the spark notes so I understand what I need to tell you as the person I'm delegating it to, and you make the decision. For lease negotiations, for example, if I send an email to a big client and I'm like, hey, this is what I think we should counter on. We should do all these things, yada, yada, yada. If they are reading every single line, one, it means that they don't trust me, likely. Two, it means they're not used to delegating as much as they typically do. They likely have attorneys for this kind of thing, first off. But when they see an email like that, they're going to say, okay, this guy knows what he's doing. I trust him. Yes, just do it.
Yeah.
They don't want to have to deal with it. They don't want to be in there redlining their own lease. Yeah.
So surprisingly, to ask another design question, how would you say that design impacts, your process in commercial real estate from what you've done?
So when someone is going through commercial real estate transactions, like I, said, they typically have never done it before. Maybe they've done it once. And so whenever you're working with them, there's this really interesting oxymoron that happens where you have to bring them through the process with the amount of detail as if they're an infant in this. But you have to say it in a way, and you have to deliver it in a way that makes them feel like they already know this stuff. And you're just saying it to be redundant. It's actually a really interesting dynamic, but you have to do it because these are people who have enormous amount of, power and responsibility within their companies, and yet they don't know anything about what you're showing them. So when you're showing them stuff and when you're taking them through the process, the better your designs are, the better your materials are, your collateral is, it goes miles. One, it shows that you really care about your attention to detail. It shows that it actually really matters. Their transaction actually really matters, and that you didn't just rip something off of an Excel sheet and print it out, right? The second thing that happens is that if you're really good at communicating through your design materials, through your collateral, you're able to bring them through a process without more questions, and you're able to streamline things. Everything about my process and my systems, working with over 30 transactions at any given time, you have to be really good with your systems. You have to be really good with your processes. And if you don't have great collateral, you're taking calls all the time explaining things. You have to be able to communicate it well. So that's where I'll leave it there.
You're going to make this a really good ad for my company. But I was going to say, so the collateral part, can you kind of explain, I guess, in more detail, what makes a piece of collateral really, really not good versus really, really good? So would you say it's mainly simplicity? It's mainly explaining everything you need to explain. Is there any other kind of major principles to talk about?
Yeah. So I can tell you the cons and then I can give you the reverse. So whenever you're showing a client like a building a purchase, for example, you don't need to give them all the information about the building up front. Especially when you're first starting a process, you're showing them 30 buildings, right? They don't need the deed when you're first showing them 30 buildings for every single building or the title report. They don't need all of that stuff, right? All that they need to know on the first pass, they're first taking a look at 30 different buildings, is the information that's relevant for them to take the next step, right? And so breaking that up and not overwhelming clients really speeds up the process. If you send a client something that's got just an enormous amount of material for all 30 properties, right? They're going to take 2-3 weeks to get back to you. And you don't want that. You want to send them a list of 30 properties. They take a look. They say, okay, right away, I know 20 of these aren't going to work. Out of the 10, I think we'd be stringing along 3. Let's do a deep dive on the 7. Mm-hmm. Deeper, right? But the worst collateral that I've ever seen, the worst marketing materials I've ever seen is when you're over explaining things and you're explaining things that don't even matter. Keep it simple. Say the things that really matter. Make it look really, really good, like you really paid attention and you really cared, and then go to the next step where you can dive a little deeper.
That is like one of the most important things to talk about every day is like the sequence. People always say like, what is the right thing I should deliver here? What's the pitch I should make here? When should I deliver this particular proposal? And I say, well, what's the sequence you're delivering it in? Because if it's the first conversation and they go, hey, I'm interested, like send me some more info, and you just send them a 300-page deck, they're going to throw it out. They don't even care. And I think it's knowing the sequence in which you deliver these things that actually informs more of the decision rather than, anything else. So
in my business, especially in the corporate services side where I'm negotiating for a company that has 200 locations across the globe, right? That knowing that process and having like a systems set in place where you got an SOP that you can follow every single time, that is really, really helpful because then you can tighten up all of those little things and you can move stuff around and you can actually find out where your bottlenecks are and where the process steps should go. And if you've been doing it for as long as I have, for years, just refining and refining and refining, you can get a really good system. And you should have one.
I do want to focus on that. There's so many ways I could take it. So the SOP part, writing some good standard operating procedures.
Yeah.
You have any good tips on that around creating that for your company? And because that stretches a lot into design.
Yeah. So I'll say this. Before I came to Whole Lunch Food Commercial, we didn't really have a corporate services side of our business, right? We had a couple of the company had a couple of clients that had locations in a couple different markets, but not to the scale that I brought in, when I came from my old firm. And so I had to build a lot of stuff. When I was building stuff, because I've done it and refined it so many times, the best advice I can give is look at your process and go through every single step of your process. I mean, down to the detail. It's absolutely ridiculous. Do it on a piece of paper. You don't need to do it in some fancy, Word doc presentation, nothing like that. But every single step on a piece of paper, write it down. And then once you do that, section it off. Now you're going to flesh everything out. That's the easiest way to do it. If you're delivering it to people who work for you, which you are and which a lot of people do, I'd highly recommend you use images. You do a good design where you can conclusively, concisely explain what the process is so that they don't have to keep coming back to you. But step 1 is put it all on paper. Step 2 is just break it into different sections. Yeah.
I think it's Steve Jobs. I'm not going to even try to do the official quote, but I think that one of his major principles was all about what can you take, you have your product, your service, whatever it is, your SOP, what can you take away from, what can you remove to make it as simple as possible? I think that's where the hard part is. It's really easy, especially for an SOP or any other design, a proposal, whatever, to add a ton of information to the document. I think the harder part is how can I explain this in 1 page versus 10 pages,
Yeah. Yeah. 100%.
And that's why even on the websites we're designing now, I'm trying to use more VSLs where you're actually having you come to the page and it's immediately a video where the person's talking. Yeah, it's interesting. Yeah, and instead of rather than explaining in 5 different pages with text, if you just create one, call it a 10-minute video of you it's really thought out, you're explaining the whole thing. Yeah. That's probably more effective from what we've seen than just having a huge website. So I think having the simplicity is probably the most important thing.
Yeah, I love that. I love how SOPs are starting to convert into video media because they should be, and it's just way easier. We're visual creatures. We like someone to just hold our hand and walk us through and tell us exactly how to do something. Especially when communicating to employees. It's really, really smart to do something like that.
Yeah. Would you kind of a quick random thought, are business cards and that sort of in-person marketing collateral really important still when you say in commercial?
So it depends. So I have an unusual amount of business that I get from people that I know that refer me, right? People who say like, oh my gosh, like you got to meet Tom. He does all this stuff. In that case, it's helpful. But at the end of the day, like if they send somebody my LinkedIn or my phone number, they're going to get pretty much the same thing, you know? I think that really the value of a business card, and it is actually very valuable, but the value of the business card is it has shelf life. Yeah. And so if it has shelf life and someone has it on their desk and they don't throw it away because for whatever reason it sits there for a long time, they're thinking about you. That's super valuable. You know, if it's just in your phone and they're in your contacts, people have 3,000 contacts, you know, they got to scroll to it. So I think that it's actually good. And I think a lot of people do business cards wrong, by the way. A lot of people do gloss. I would say don't ever do gloss because you can't write anything on it. Yeah. You know, I hope you're not. I don't want to attack your.
It's not gloss.
I love it. Don't do gloss because you can't write anything on it.
They use the rounded.
I like the rounded corners. That's great. No, that's great. Yeah. Don't do really dark colors because if you have black or blue, it's not going to come up on it, right? And then make sure you leave space so that people can write. QR codes are really good. I highly suggest that. I don't suggest necessarily doing QR codes to the whole like this is my email, this is my contact. And it's not bad, right? But I really think the LinkedIn QR codes are really sharp. Leave enough space though where you can write stuff. And when you give somebody a business card, make sure you use that writing space. Make sure you're writing something on it. Oh, hey, you know, great to meet you. This and that, you know, here you go. When you do that, when they pick it up and they look at it, they're not like, who's this guy? Yeah. I can't remember. I met 40 people. They look at that little note and they're like, oh, got it. You know, that's what happens. You know, the synapses in your brain just connect and you know who wrote it and you remember. It's valuable.
100%. And I think we should definitely talk about events, conferences, networking things in person. I know in every industry there's there are own different things you can do. How important would you say, we'll talk about conferences and events specifically first. How important would you say that is for you or for other people in commercial real estate?
So it depends on where your target customer is. Commercial real estate's huge, right? So I haven't really dug into everything that I do, but because I represent companies almost exclusively, I can't necessarily work with somebody. I'm not really looking for somebody who's been at Ericsson for 10 years and they've got $2 million in their bank account, right? And then they want to go buy a building, right? That's not exactly my customer base. And so because it's so specific, events, depending on what it is, can be a complete waste of time. They can be, you know. There's a lot of shaking hands and kissing babies, commercial real estate events that go on that is not beneficial for a broker to even go to. It's just kind of like I look good in front of my peers. Yeah. Like I don't care about that. If your client is a commercial real estate broker, dude, go to those events, you know. But if you're a commercial real estate broker and everybody at the event is a commercial real estate broker, what's the point? Yeah. You know, what are you doing? There's only specific use cases and it's definitely not client development. You know, but for networking groups, for deep dives, for getting in groups of people where it's consistent and you know the people in the group, peer advisory stuff where you can go deep in relationships, those are actually really good. Those are very valuable because when you know somebody really well, you know that you can trust them with your buddies building, right? And you can refer that.
I always say that, which is bad to say, but I do say you kind of have to go with an agenda in mind. You know, if you're looking to recruit for your firm, let's say you're looking to recruit brokers, go where the brokers are. If you're looking at business in any industry, well, then go where that is fruitful, I think.
100%.
But I've been to tons of events where I was like, oh, you know, it's similar to what I do. I'll go. And nothing comes out of it. You just wait for the day. So I think kind of knowing if you're going to spend your time in a marketing opportunity, knowing what you're going to get out of it and trying to invest your time like that. So
100%. Really, really think about what you want out of it. And if it doesn't align, don't bother.
Tom, thank you so much for coming today. Where can people find you and where can people go help you out?
LinkedIn, Tom Land, commercial real estate. I will pop up.
There we go.
Yeah, if you need office space or you're a corporation that's got multi-market presence, tell them you got a guy.
Everyone go follow him. And this is the Omis Digital Podcast.